So we've read a little bit of this Creepy Centipedes book, although Alvaro's just joining our group today. Let me write his name down. So guys, if you look over here, we've been thinking about like how readers think about the information they're learning in a nonfiction text. We've also been thinking about like, does this text, what is it explaining? Is it explaining history, animals? What is this explaining?
Explaining nature. It's explaining nature and like how nature what kind of bugs are in nature and stuff.
You know, one thing it's also explaining, we read a little bit yesterday, is how centipedes and millipedes are different. So this author is also comparing and contrasting some things, right?
What are millipedes?
You guys want to tell them? We read some yesterday, or the other day, a couple days ago.
Yeah, millipedes.
You're going to have to talk one at a time and use your biggest voice.
Millipedes are the opposite of centipedes because centipedes, they're like hunters, and millipedes, they dig wood stuff like scavengers.
And, ooh, did you hear a word she said? She just learned that word. What was that word you said? Scavengers. Very good. Go ahead, Jason.
Well, I remember. Millipedes are different from centipedes because they have a harder shell and more legs.
Oh, yeah.
And they roll up in a ball, and their hard shell protects them.
Okay, so I want to read
I don't
some
really
more.
know, but I think centipedes, they sometimes stick to you and suck your blood.
No, we didn't read that about centipedes. That's leeches. I agree with that. So I want to read another section about where centipedes live because you want to know why I want to read this section? I want to make sure they don't live anywhere near me. I want to find out where they live. Can you go ahead and go to page 14 and 15? Well, I want to know where they live, so I want to see if they live in my house or something. Do you remember we had a goal for reading, but we also had like a language goal? Do you guys remember that? Do you remember what we were working on with our like language when we talked about things? Like I can use longer sentences in different ways. I can be flexible with my sentences, so saying things differently, not always saying them I learned, but maybe since or because this, that makes me think this, right? Or in the text it said. Or also I can use higher level vocabulary or fancy words. Like when Adia just used that word scavenger that she learned, that's using a higher level vocabulary word or a pretty fancy word. So as we're reading books,
We think of like,
I want you to be thinking about how can I explain my thinking in a different way, and maybe how can we use some higher level vocabulary word or some fancy words, maybe that the author used to tell what I learned today. So go ahead, let's find out where do centipedes live. And make sure you really use the text features to help you, like this caption here. Go ahead and whisper read that page and then we'll talk about what we learned. Whisper, whisper.
also need to live where they can get shrivel
You took it?
up and down. Usually centipedes stay outside. They look for dead plants that
Let's talk together since we're all done. What did you guys learn about centipedes and where they live?
That they can live in the basement, and if they don't find somewhere like warm place and they can get wet, they can shrivel up and die.
I still
hang
in
on.
the basement because there's no more space.
So I like what he's sharing a fact that he learned, but Alvaro's kind of like thinking about, so what does that make me think or wonder? So let's try that. Like in the text it says, or I learned. So that makes me think, that makes me wonder. Jace, do you think you could try that? Like in the text it said, and I want you guys to listen to Jace's idea and see what you think about it. You agree with it? Go ahead.
In the text it said that also to live where the centipedes to live where they can get wet. They need to live where they can get wet. Or they'll shrivel up and die.
So what's that make you think? Or what do you know now?
That centipedes have to live in a warm and wet place, or they'll shrivel up and die if they don't get wet.
So that makes me think places like basements, you know, they can be kind of wet. Is that why you think centipedes might live there?
Maybe they want to get wet. They need to get wet. Maybe because if they don't get wet and they're really dry, maybe like they'll get really like their skin will get tighter and tighter and tighter.
What was that word that they called that? Jace said it. What was that word? If their skin gets tighter and tighter and tighter, and then they die. Shrivel. Have you ever heard that word before?
No.
Yeah, that's like shrivel. Like, and I think of like a snake laying in the sun and getting dry and dry and dry. It starts to like shrivel up.
I don't like
maybe
when it's
when you
So that's why they need some kind of wet, right?
like when it,
like saying that you're in the desert and your skin gets like
Dry. Really dry. Then you shrivel up.
I know. I learned about this book about this page
Where else do they live?
is that they live in leaf piles and like sometimes they like live in warm places to find like some to eat and like they what's it called?
Why don't
They
you
find-
try using this? You're saying lots of facts that you're learning. I want you to try to focus on one thing. So in the text it says, or I learned, tell me about one thing, and then let's talk about that one idea, one thing you learned. So try that. In the text it says, or I learned, and try to read from the text, because we really want to go back to the text to share what we're learning, right? So try that.
In the text I learned that centipedes live in warm places and they also need somewhere they can get wet.
Where else do centipedes live?
centipedes live outside in dead plants or damp places to live.
So what's that make you think about, or what do you know now?
I don't know that usually centipedes stay outside to look for dead plants.
Or damp places. Do you know what damp means? Damp places?
Like what?
Like wet, damp, wet places. Again, so that they don't shrivel up and die. So they really like those wet places, right?
Like a
And that you can find them under a rock or leaf.
I found them under a rock.
So why would they want to be under rocks or leaf piles?
Because underground is kind of wet.
That's what I agree. Yeah, it's kind of like wet under
Because
it.
you know how when the little things up, they look like water fountains, but they throw all the water under, and maybe they live under the rocks, and they feel like the water spreads out.
Because when it rains,
I'm
it
confused
goes
what you're
down.
talking about. The water fountains. What do you mean?
No, it's not like a water fountain. It's like when it rains, some rain goes on top, and it goes into this thing, and it lands on this.
Oh, the thing on the side of your roof?
Yeah.
Do you guys know what that's called?
No.
It's like on your roof that the rain goes down. Do you guys know what that's
Yeah, and
called?
it makes a bunch
It's
of
called a
water.
gutter.
That's where.
Have you ever seen it? Kind of looks like this. Like if it's raining, it goes along. Like here's your roof, and then it goes along the roof, and then it goes down to the ground. Is that what you're talking about?
And then it spreads out, and then it kind of gets off, and then that's how they centipede lives under.
Yeah, because the water goes where? Where does that water
So the
go?
water goes on the roof and then it falls and then goes down.
Down to the ground, right? And so the ground is usually like damp, right?
Or when it rains, the water goes into the soil and makes it wet.
Wet, or what's that new word we learned instead of wet?
Yeah.
Damp. We're gonna stop here. I'm gonna let you take this book and really think about like the different text features, but also as you're learning new facts and information, think about, so what does that mean to you? What do you know now? Don't just say right out of the book, I learned blah, 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 blah. So what does that make you think, or what do you know now about centipedes? And also, I like how some of you are really using some of those fancy vocabulary words like damp. What was another one? Startled. As you're reading these words, we want to think about what they mean and then try to use them like real authors. Okay? Tell yourself, way to go.
Way to go.
You can pause it soon.